Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Beachside Podcast. I'm your host, the HOD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates from the episodes and all the content on the channel. Follow us on social media. The usernames on the screen and the links are in the description, of course. Join us on social media and listen on Spotify, Google Podcast or any other platform. Welcome. Kicking off things in Italy, of course, we're talking about the Serie A round 20, and I'm going to start from Turin as Juventus drawn against Napoli 1-1. Now, first of all, this game was great, by the way. This was as expected, as I predicted in yesterday's show. It was wonderful viewing. In general, of course, both sets of teams have absentees in their squads, of course. Juventus were without Bonucci and Chiellini, their two experienced centre-halves. They started with Rugani and Matthias de Ligt in that position. Also, they had a couple of interesting choices, of course. Paulo Dybala just returned from an injury layoff, of course, as of late. But Napoli on the other side, they were the more, I think, affected side by injuries and absentees. They already have Koulibaly and Zambunkisa surely to be, missing for at least maybe 2 or 3 weeks, depending on what happens in the AFCON. Then you have, of course, the different injuries, the suspension for Mario Rui, and the injuries for Kevin Malcuit, having Lozano, and Victor Osimhen, who's been out for COVID for a while as well. Juve started with what seems like a 4-3-3, but I think in reality it was more of a 4-4-2, because you look at Adrien Rabiot and how he's positioning on the pitch, you think he's more of a fourth player, more the fourth midfielder on the left. His almost same use within the French national team with Didier Deschamps. Locatelli, I thought it was interesting that he was the CDM in this one, because I think we know him from his Sassuolo days, from his days with the national team in the Euros. I don't think that he likes to be the screen in front of the back four, which was an interesting choice, and I think it showed during the game that it's not his favourite position, because Napoli on the other side, they had two players in Diego Demme and Stanislav Lobotka who really had a good game in the midfield and controlled the midfield, because Locatelli just doesn't know how to do that job of being a CDM, a straight CDM who cuts the balls from the midfield and just makes tackles. It's not Locatelli's style of play anyway. So the plan for the game, I think, for Juve at the very least, was probably to try and lure Napoli in and hit them on the counter, relying on Chiesa's runs from deep. Their best player, I think, this season, Federico Chiesa, by a country mile. As I mentioned in the start for the formation, of course, in my opinion, it's a 4-4-2 more than anything. Juve tried to capitalise on these situations where they have Chiesa running from deep, but it was to no avail. Napoli, as the game grew on, they controlled it. They knew what to do with the ball, unlike Juventus. And they controlled the midfield, as I mentioned, in particular Diego Demme and Stanislav Lobotka. I really want to shout them out because they're really a couple of good players. And I think they deserve more, particularly Diego Demme, who's been, I think, so underrated since his days at Leipzig, where he was before joining Napoli. Juventus definitely were bad in the first half at the very least. There was no pressure, there was no good positioning actually from Juve. I mean, you feel that their positioning is always off the mark, and if you wanted any other testament for that, you can see the goal that Napoli scored. Insigne's passed towards Politano to set up Mertens and raised around 6 Juventus players and their bad positioning, the whole midfield and the defence as well. So the sense of pressing from Juve was lost, I think, since the days of Marchisio, since the days of Vidal and Pogba and that kind of midfield. Juventus lost any intensity in the midfield because they sort of modernised their game and went away from a classic CDM or a classic ball retriever in the middle, and they went more with a Jorginho type. I mean, they tried to sign Jorginho himself a couple of years ago, so there's no real surprise about that. Napoli didn't really rush their position. They moved the ball really well. They knew what to do with it. There was good movement. The counterattacks were well organised, unlike Juventus, who were pretty shambolic. I mean, the transitions. Federico Bernardeschi, by the way, you don't feel that you get the best of him when you play him on that left-hand side for some reason. Like, yes, he gives you a couple of good matches, but I don't think he's an out-and-out winger who can support you. I think he may be more of a central. If he plays more central, maybe he'll give you more. I don't know. Because he kept trying to cut central, kept trying to be central, but I think couldn't do it anyway. Napoli were generally better, I think, in the whole game. Probably except for the first 10 minutes of the second half, where Juve equalised and had a good spell afterwards, where we thought, oh yeah, Juve are going to be returning, come back, remontada, they're going to be closing the gap anyway. But they didn't. Napoli actually regained control of the game the more the half went on, and they almost was close to equalise, to score the second, a couple of times, if it wasn't for Chesney and for defensive blockings as well. And then later on in the game, Allegri decided to introduce Dybala, played around 25 minutes. I mean, he was good, and he helped inject a little bit more of energy in the attack for Juventus, particularly with Chiesa leaving the pitch later on for Dejan Kulusevski. So they needed someone as creative as Dybala can be in that attacking department. But generally, it was a good result, I think, for Juve. It continues their upward trajectory. Question mark. I mean, they had a good form, as I mentioned yesterday. Had a good form leading in this game, but still they're 3 points behind Atalanta, who didn't play their game against Torino. Napoli keep a short distance from Milan, 5 points, and 6 points behind Inter. It's not the best of gaps. I mean, they could have won and improved their status, particularly with Inter as well, not playing against Bologna away from home. But overall, they didn't do that, and they didn't manage to do that, and they absolutely, I think accepted the draw by the end of the game. That's what I'm going to say. Elsewhere in this fixture, of course, Milan hosted Roma. They defeated them 3-1. I think it was the kind of game where the scenario might be a fuel for excuse, I would say, for Jose Mourinho. I mean, a penalty early on, 2 red cards late in the game, and a loss, so you can expect what he's going to be like in the press conference afterwards, or any interview with journalists. Probably he'd find a lot of excuses for him losing this one. But I think Milan should be happy about the result, obviously. 1 point behind Inter now, even if Inter didn't play their game, so it's not technically a big advantage, I think, for Milan. But the fact is, Milan also were depleted. They were, entering this game without basically their first choice defending, Simon Kjaer. There was no Tomori, there was no Romagnoli. They didn't have any defensive options as replacement. They basically, what you got from the start as a defensive four, that's what you got. They were the better side, surely in the start of the game, where they scored a couple of goals inside 20 minutes. I mean, an early penalty that was really stupidly given, I would say, by Tammy Abraham. I mean, why you would lend your hand like that for the ball? Why you would give away a penalty like that? A cheap penalty early on. Olivier Giroud, with his 5th goal of the season, goes in, scores, and gives Milan the early lead. Then Messias Jr. takes advantage from a second ball rebounding of the post from an attack by Giroud that started with a mistake from Roma's defence, to give Milan a 2-0 lead. Tammy Abraham at least rectified his mistake late in the first half by scoring the goal, which saw almost Roma get a lifeline out of this game, but eventually it translated to nothing. Milan really, they improved in the second half, Roma a little bit better, but I think Milan generally dominated them, and deserved to be victorious, of course, deserved to win this game 3-1, and as I mentioned, it's a big win for them, considering that Inter face Lazio on Sunday, and it's a big situation overall, I would say, for Milan now, and a big opportunity, I think, for them to catch up and to put themselves in the title race for good. For Roma, it's not the best of results, yes, it's a loss that will set them up quite badly behind. In the table, they're now 7th with 32 points. They're behind Fiorentina and behind Juve. And I don't really think that Roma are actually worse than Juve. It's just the fact that there's so much up and down that you don't really figure out what they're exactly doing anyway. The Roma sides and the capital side woes continues because Lazio, they went behind 2-0 inside 10 minutes against Empoli. They ended the game 3-3. They had to thank, I think, Milinkovic-Savic, in my opinion, being the hero for them. An assist for Immobile's first goal, and 2 goals himself including a late equaliser to give Lazio, I think, a vital point of what could have been a very, very bad game for them. They were technically the better side, the more dominant, but the start was really, really awful, conceding 2 goals, an early penalty as well, given by the goalkeeper Thomas Strakosha. So you really wonder what Lazio have this season. I genuinely don't think. I mean, they're 32 points as well, alongside Roma and Fiorentina, but a big asterisk on this one. First of all, Fiorentina didn't play their game, which is supposed to be against Udinese yesterday. And Lazio, I mean, also just like Roma, they've been so up and down as well with Maurizio Sarri that you cannot really figure out what is exactly their style that they're doing, what is exactly the point of them this season playing, what is their identity. Is it Sarri ball, is it Sarrismo as well, as Sarri was with Juve. So it's interesting to see how they're going to do it. And also, as I mentioned, they play against Inter on Sunday, so it's really interesting for them as well. They host Inter, or they travel to Milan to face Inter on Sunday, so it's going to be a big game for them as well. Elsewhere, Spezia defeated or lost to Verona 2-1. Gianluca Caprari with the brace to give the away side the win. Sassuolo drawn against Genoa 1-1, with Matteo Destro giving the away side the lead via a beautiful heel flick, but Berardi's 55th minute equaliser denied them the win. Early on in the day, of course, Cagliari managed to defeat Sampdoria 2-1 early on in the round. 4 games, as I mentioned, were not played. Bologna, Inter Milan, Atalanta, Torino, Salernitana, Venezia, and Fiorentina, Udinese. And the action continues actually in the Serie A on round 21. All the matches are supposed to be played on Sunday. For the moment, only one match is getting cancelled. Probably more going to be cancelled as the days go on. Maybe tomorrow or late today is going to be decided, or maybe even on Sunday that will be decided. But for the moment, as it stands, 9 games are going to be played, which are, of course, Venezia versus Milan, Empoli, Sassuolo, Torino facing Fiorentina, Cagliari hosting Bologna, Napoli hosting Sampdoria, Udinese, Atalanta. This is the game that is supposed to be cancelled. Roma hosts Juve, Genoa hosts Spezia, and Inter hosts Lazio, with Hellas Verona hosting Salernitana. Of course, COVID running rampant in SerieA as well, forcing a couple of issues, forcing a couple of cancellations for games as well. Hopefully everybody's fine, and hopefully this pandemic ends as soon as possible, because we really need to enjoy our lives back anyway. Obviously the big games in this one are Roma, Juventus, and Inter Milan. Lazio. It's really interesting. This debate about Roma-Juventus. I just mentioned earlier that I don't necessarily think that Roma are worse than Juventus. It's just the fact that they've been so up and down that you cannot really figure out what they're doing. Juventus might sound in a good form. As I mentioned, in the last 10 games, only 1 loss. 6 wins. A draw against Napoli is not the worst thing in the world, particularly this season. But maybe if you dip a little bit into the depth of the situation, you could see that Napoli were depleted a little bit. They lost a lot of players for various reasons, so you thought maybe Juventus could have had opportunity to beat them and get some points off them. Then you think it hasn't been Juventus' style this season to emphatically beat their opponents. In fact, you look at the number of teams that have scored more than Juve this season, and there is 10 teams who scored more than Juve this season, which is always interesting to hear, and always interesting to see as a stat anyway. Roma as well, as I mentioned, under Mourinho, they will be they're all sorts of up and down. They're all sorts of non-consistent, let's say, for the season. They win some, they lose some, they draw some, they give you some ridiculously positive results, then they lose some ridiculous games as well. I mean, I'm not going to mention the Europa Conference League anyway, but in the league as well, they had some ridiculous results and dropped some ridiculous points as well. Overall, this is probably the game of the two sides in this season where you think one of them should be in the top 4. Roma probably are not close enough at the moment with Mourinho. Juve, they're close, but I think any negative results, and I think everything would go south for them. Champions League is still coming for them somehow. They're still in it. I really believe that maybe they will fall off a cliff a little bit, but we'll see. the business end of the season is still going on, and we're still waiting, really, for what was going to happen with Juve for the rest of the season. Will they get top 4? Won't they? Will Atalanta drop? Will Napoli drop out of that top 4? I mean, it's interesting to see how the situation pans out with those both teams. Atalanta now 2 games are going to be in hand for them, so this is going to be probably a massive advantage for the Bergamo side when everything is almost decided. The other big game, of course, it's Inter Milan versus Lazio. Inter Milan will have a big advantage, I think, on this one. Have been exempt or spared the trouble of playing against Bologna on Thursday. They will probably feel a little bit more rested. Their form is unbelievable as of late. Lazio, the form has been decent, but again, the result against Empoli yesterday didn't feel exactly well. The start was rough. Conceding 3 goals, continuing to concede, not exactly the strongest of defending at the moment. Lazio, 37 goals they conceded. They're one of the worst defences in the league, considering that, to just put it into perspective, Venezia, who are on 16th, they conceded less. Conceded 34 goals only. Verona are behind them, conceded 33. So, is it working under Maurizio Sarri offensively? Yes, it is. 42 goals this season. They are the third most proficient side and prolific side in front of goal, behind Inter Milan and AC Milan themselves. And then, you think about that. Those defensive problems, will they cost them a place at the top 4? Yes. Will they cost them a European place? Yes. So coming against a side like Inter, who are much stern defensively, clearly a cut above everyone else when it comes to that department. Only them and Napoli conceded 15 goals. Juve are second best defense with 18 goals, but that's not a big mark, I would say. Inter Milan would definitely be motivated to play this game a little bit fresher. They don't have the same amount of depleted squad as other teams do. They only have Dzeko as, I think, a positive case for COVID, and they'll probably get him by the time this game rolls around. So it'll be always interesting to see how things pan out in Serie A. It's an interesting, I think, season in Italian football, and definitely one that is worthy watching. From Italy, we move to Spain, and it is round 20 of action in La Liga, of course, after a very interesting weekend last time out with Real Madrid dropping points and losing against Getafe 1-0 away from home. And before a Super Cup that is featuring a Clásico between them and Barcelona, and another semi-final that features Atletico Madrid versus Athletic Club. It's interesting to see how this week will pan out in La Liga. Real Madrid face Valencia, that's on Saturday, of course, and Sevilla face Getafe on Sunday. I think these two are the more interesting games because they directly tie into what is going to be happening at the top of the table. Let's run down, by the way, the card of the week. Overall, Levante kicks things off on Saturday by facing Mallorca, Real Sociedad versus Celta Vigo, Granada versus Barcelona, and Real Madrid Valencia. That is on Saturday. Vallecano versus Real Betis. Vallecano, by the way, shout out to them. They're having a really good season, as well as Real Betis. Sevilla versus Getafe, that's on Sunday as well. Deportivo Alaves versus Atletico Bilbao. Osasuna versus Cadiz. Villarreal Atletico. And on Monday, 10th, it's going to be Espanyol versus Elche. As you mentioned, those two are the biggest games. I think Real Madrid, Valencia, and Sevilla versus Getafe. You would think Real Madrid versus Valencia, you would think Ancelotti's side maybe focusing on El Clásico, trying to prepare for El Clásico, thinking about it at the very least, even in the distant future, and in the back of their minds they will be probably preparing and trying to motivate themselves to win another Clásico, to win their 5th Clásico on the bounce. But before that, I think Valencia it should be a test for them, but I don't think it will. I don't exactly see how Valencia will trouble Real Madrid, although they have a decent form as of late, but I don't think they will trouble Real Madrid that much. Of course, on the reverse fixture between the two, Real Madrid went ahead victorious away from home at the Mestalla 2-1. It doesn't look that easy, it doesn't look that hard, although it doesn't look that easy actually when you see the score of 2-1, but I think it was much more comfortable than it should have been, I would say, for Real Madrid at the Mestalla. The other game for Sevilla, of course, is against Getafe, a side that defeated Real Madrid in the last time out, and certainly it'll be always interesting to see how Sevilla will respond to Real Madrid playing before them. So it's going to be always interesting to see how Real Madrid will push Sevilla mentally if they win against Valencia. Sevilla will need every point that they will register. I think of some results that they had late last year where they could have made better. Obviously, the draw against Barcelona, you thought maybe that was their best chance of beating Barcelona in the league, but they didn't. They drew 1-1, and they lost the opportunity to close the gap down. This could have been even tighter coming into this weekend if they defeated Barcelona then. But, of course, they will have to focus on the game in hand that they have. It hasn't been an easy win for them against Cadiz, but also it hasn't been an easy game for Real Madrid as well against that same side. By the same token, it would be a hard game against Getafe, just like it was for Real Madrid. And Sevilla, for all their goodwill, for all their good shape, good tactics, the way they place themselves, the football that they play under Lopetegui, I don't think that they are potent enough and prolific enough to be title challengers. I mean, yes, they scored 30 goals. They're one of the best attacks of the season, but I don't think the standards is that high in La Liga. You look at Betis behind them, 32 goals scored. Atletico Madrid, who are in a drastically worse situation than what they were last season, are 31 goals as well. Barcelona with 30 goals as well. So you think that Sevilla should probably be more potent in attack. They have a really good squad. They have a really well. They are really well drilled. They play some good football, but definitely they need more emphasis in the attack. They need more scorers. They need more goals, which will mean, of course, more points and more wins eventually, because they are pretty stern defensively, and they have a really good record defensively. The strongest defense in La Liga so far, with only 13 goals conceded. Real Madrid are the second best with 17 goals. So again, before the Super Cup, before the semi-finals of the Super Cup, it will be interesting to see how Real Madrid will react to that loss against Getafe, how Sevilla will react to Real Madrid playing. Is it going to give them motivation if Real Madrid drop points against Valencia? Who knows? And Barcelona, as I mentioned earlier, have a tricky trip to Granada. They drew 1-1, of course, in the first game, which was, I think, probably one of the worst points of Koeman's era with Barcelona. Now has been replaced by Xavi. Things looking slightly better, not a lot better, but slightly better. In the midst of Laporte saying they're back and they're going to be, playing big time in the transfer window, and they're going to be buying Haaland and all of that. I think it's a big mess, but I think nobody really cares about it at the moment, because the first thing important for Barcelona at the moment is to get results, get better on the table, improve their season, finish the best way they can, maybe winning the Europa League and returning to the Champions League, because I don't really see them getting into the top 4 in the league, despite the fact that they're close. They're 5th at the moment, but I don't see having enough in them really with this squad, with the sort of still youngsters, not experienced on these kind of situations. I don't think they will get there, but maybe, who knows, stranger things happen. Maybe they will finish the season top 4 anyway. But overall, it's going to be a tricky one anyway, and they will need to take care, because Granada are a very, very tricky side, and they can serve some upsets in the league as well. So the table before this one is Real Madrid at the top of 46 points, Sevilla 41, Betis with 33 points, Atletico Madrid 32, Barcelona with 31 points, Rayo Vallecano 30, as well as Real Sociedad. At 7th, Villarreal 28 with Valencia, 27 for Athletic Club, 26 for Espanyol, Celta Vigo with 23, as well as Granada, 22 for Osasuna, Mallorca with 20, 18 Getafe, 16 Elche and Alaves, and Cadiz are 19th with 14 points, while Levante are bottom with 8 points. From Spain, we move in to the African Cup of Nations, of course, kicking off this Sunday. And I wanted to do a quick, I would say, preview, of course. We talked yesterday about the controversy, about the situation with the African Cup of Nations, why it feels so talked about, really, and so, let's say, fuss creating in the media and elsewhere. Let's talk about this competition in general as a whole. My predictions of sorts for this competitions, of course. The groups as it stand, it kicks off on Sunday, as I mentioned, with Cameroon, the host nation, hosting and facing Burkina Faso. In Group A, they feature alongside Cape Verde and Ethiopia. In Group B, it is Guinea, Malawi, Senegal, and Zimbabwe. In Group C, it is Comoros, first-timers in this competition, as well as Gabon, Ghana, and Morocco. It's a very interesting situation in that group as well. Group D, it is Egypt, Guinea-Bissau, Nigeria, and Sudan. In Group E, it is Algeria, the defending champions, with Equatorial Guinea, Ivory Coast, and Sierra Leone. And in Group F, of course, the group that I would probably watch the most as well, because it features Gambia, Mali, Mauritania, and Tunisia. Quickly, of course, in this competition, you look at the favourites, you look at the field, probably there are 4 or 5 teams that deserve a shout to be the winners. On top of those, of course, there's Algeria, not just because they're defending champions, but they're going about it as well very, very strong. They have a very strong side, very strong squad, undeniably the best, probably, squad in Africa at the moment. Best team, I would say, certainly. I mean, best squad, it might be debatable. You could say Senegal has better, some individual players that are playing better, in other departments. But I think as a team, as a compact team, Algeria are the best. And certainly it's interesting because they've been good since 2017, 2016 probably, but they've never been a team. And once they became a team under Jamal Belmadi, they became the African champions. And they really, I think, and they have a decent shot of also representing Africa in the World Cup and being really good at it. So I think all luck to them if they want to do that. But as far as the African competition is concerned, I think they're top of the list if you want to talk about favourites. Obviously, I don't need to mention the names because it's a pretty bloated squad, really, of very good players across all departments. So you look at the likes of Issa Mendy and Ben Sabini in the back. You look at Mahrez up front, Youssef Belaidi, Baghdad Bounjah. You look at the middle, there is Soufiane Fagouli, Yassin Brahimi. These names that are just so good together. More than just individually, they're so good together, they understand each other, they create a really strong team that is going to be the top favourite, in my opinion, to win the tournament, despite maybe some reservation on the actual style they play with. Elsewhere, I mean, maybe I think Senegal comes after them because also they have a very strong squad. The finalists of the last tournament, and I backed them in the last tournament actually to win, but they didn't. They reached the final and they lost against Algeria, but I'm still backing them in this one. They have a really golden generation, and under Aliou Cisse, they've been doing some very wonderful work. It's a shame in the World Cup they didn't reach the second round because of technicality of yellow cards. I mean, it still hurts in some way. But they're really good. I think their group is pretty easy. It's with Guinea and Malawi and Zimbabwe. Probably they're going to be joined by Guinea in the next round. Who knows? But certainly, in my opinion, they are the second favourites, and maybe not much between them and Algeria in terms of winning their competition. Third favourite for me are, in my opinion, my national team, Tunisia. I can't really say otherwise because the reality is, I might have put Egypt there, I might have put Nigeria there, but here's the reality. Nigeria are in a big mess at the moment, and they are not exactly the strongest of sides. Also, the fact that they've been drawn with Egypt in the same group maybe really translates how tough it is for them to get a grip of what they should be doing in the African competition. I mean, they're still a good side. They're still a very good side. They eliminated us from the semi-final, or they got us, got the third place instead of us, Tunisia, in the last tournament. But I think they're not as good as they should be now. Their search for a new manager continues. There have been talks of Jose Mourinho and other coaches and all of that, and definitely it's been interesting to see. It's been interesting to see how they fare in this tournament alongside Egypt, which are another favourites of mine, maybe below Tunisia. But I think I would put Tunisia, I'd put my country there at third, respectfully, just because Senegal and Algeria are provenly better than them, but also because I think we're better than Nigeria and Egypt. I mean, overall, we have just about above a better squad of players than Egypt. Yes, Egypt have Mohamed Salah, but aside from that, who do they have? Like, who are the big names that they have that you can say, oh yeah, this is the squad that can win an African Cup of Nations easy? I don't think so. I think we have a better midfield, probably one of the best midfield collection of talents in Africa, and we have a good chance, I think, of doing it. Then, of course, as I mentioned, it comes Egypt, just because they have Mo Salah, who's a superstar, but I don't think they have much else going for them, really, and if you saw what they did in their own ground in 2019, you won't be really surprised if they go out of the group stages, they go out of the next round, the round of 16, of course, because this competition is going to be the second edition, played with the 24-team system. Those are, I think, my 5 favourites. The fact is that 2 of them on the same group doesn't help, because one of them is going to see the other eliminated or be in second. One of them may even go as a best third in this situation, because this competition is really going to use this system of best thirds to determine the 4 best thirds are going to be joining those originally 12 sides to qualify in this competition. Quick predictions, of course. For those who are going to qualifying, I'm going to predict the top 2. I'm going to leave the 4 best thirds till later. I want them to be determined later. Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Cape Verde and Ethiopia in Group A. I think Cameroon, surely, not just because the host, but I think they're a cut above those 3 other teams. And I think maybe joined by Burkina Faso. They've been decent. They almost nicked the place from Algeria to qualify to the playoffs, but they didn't. They had some good matches with them. They'd drawn against them in Algeria, which is really, really important. In Group B, I think it's going to be Senegal and Guinea. I'm sorry. Zimbabwe also have an interesting situation, because they really look like they may be replaced by Zambia. The Zimbabwean FA is still waiting for the verdict from FIFA because of the whole government interfering in the FA situation. From Group C, it is going to be, in my opinion, Morocco and Ghana. I'm sorry, Gabon and Comoros, but maybe surprises happen. Who knows? In Group D, I think it will be Egypt, Nigeria. I don't think there's a doubt about that. In Group E, Algeria and Ivory Coast. I don't think there is a doubt about that as well. And in Group F, Tunisia, I think they should be top in this group. I think, at the worst of cases, I think they qualify second behind Mali. That's what I really think. Mali are a really good side, maybe a sleep ahead of the tournament as well, but I think Tunisia and Mali are qualifying from that group. Of course, we're going to be talking about the AFCON as it goes on. That's it for me for this episode. Thanks for watching / listening. I'm Uzabu, the HD of the PSP. Like, share and subscribe. The whole YouTube shebang. Do it, of course. Follow us on social media. The usernames are in the screen and the links are in the description. And of course, listen on Google Podcasts, Spotify, any other platform. And until next time, I'll be seeing you soon. Goodbye. Behind closed doors, I'm a fool for your love.